For someone who has the audacity to call themselves the Feywild Fiend, I have a hard time getting Fae. And I know I can't be alone in that, because Fae are supposed to be inhuman. Even in classic folklore, they're not like us, but in what ways? And I don't feel like I've ever understood Fae behavior as clearly as I did when I picked up The Ladies of Grace Adieu and Other Stories by Susanna Clarke. I'm going to use this book to give you 4 rules. Yeah, I've got 4 written down here that will help you understand the Fae, run them if you're a DM, play them if you're a player, all that jazz. So buckle up, class. We're getting our rules from the text. Very, very quick story summary. You don't really need to know details, so I'm going to do this as short as possible. There is a Jewish physician in the 18th century named David, and he's friends with a fairy, Tom Brightwind. And David is traveling to another place as a doctor to go see a patient. Tom wants to come with him. They come across a town called Thorsby, and this town would very much like to have a bridge. And it's really Tom we're focusing on here, because he is the fairy that I think so well defines all fairies. Or if not him, the stuff that happens around him. For example, let's go to rule 1. Extremity is the norm, normalcy is strange. At the beginning of this story, David goes to see Tom. Tom lives in this castle. It's part of other castles, interconnected. I could really make several videos about this story alone, but David is walking through a castle inhabited by fairies. As David walked along dim, echoing corridors and trotted up immense stone staircases, he bade a cheerful good morning to everyone he passed. But the only answer that he got was doubtful nods and curious stares, for no matter how often he visited the house, the inhabitants could never get used to him. His face was neither dazzlingly handsome nor twisted and repulsive. His figure was similarly undistinguished. His countenance expressed neither withering scorn nor irresistible fascination, but only good humor and a disposition to think well of everyone. And another line mentions that the fairies can't understand why someone would wish to have that expression, that countenance upon their face, implying a sort of choice in the matter. If you define as a nice guy, you're not making it in fairy. They don't get you, they don't like you, you confuse them, you probably scare them. Pleasantry, people-pleasing, fairies have never heard of it. And what I mean by that is fairies aren't interested in being palatable for everyone. And the way I envy that should and has been explored by a therapist. So when you're making fairies, if it's your own character, if you're a DM coming up with NPCs, find something, simplify them first. Fairy characters can have multiple facets, but find a simple emotion or feature or function that defines them extremely, and then go from there. Rule 2 is that consequences ultimately matter very little to the Fae. Turn with me, we're going to page 173 now, class, all right? We're going to be in that first big paragraph at the bottom of the page. I only taught for 1.5 years. It's been my personality ever since. In this paragraph, Tom is being sexist, but we get to the point where he says, I'm involved in, Tom counted quickly on his long white fingers, 13 wars which are being prosecuted in Fairy Major. In one particularly complicated case, I've allied myself with the Millstone Beast and with his enemy, La Dame de and sent armies to both of them. Tom paused here and frowned at his horse's ears. Which means, I suppose that I'm at war with myself. Now why did I do that? He seemed to consider a moment or two, but making no progress, he shook his head and continued. What was I saying? Tom's character really displays how fairies will make decisions in one particular moment. They're not thinking about long-term ramifications. They're not thinking about what will come later. They are just making a choice that they like then and there, and if they accidentally go to war with themselves, okay. Which I also want you DMs to particularly consider, because when your players are trying to convince a powerful entity to do something for them or to help them with something, keep in mind that the consequences of what they're wanting have to be really exciting in one particular moment and don't necessarily have to actually play out. Like, a Fae, especially an Archfey, may not care about what the party cares about. They may go along with an idea because they like it for a totally different reason that may seem silly to them, but the logic isn't going to function the same way. And by the way, if you want to include examples of that down below in the comments, I would love to hear what your Archfey might get up to with this kind of mindset. And then one more quote. Fairies exceed even Christians and Jews in their enthusiasm for babies and young children, and think nothing of adding to their brood by stealing a pretty Christian child or two. Yet in this, as in so many things, fairies rarely give much thought to the consequences of their actions. They procreate or steal other people's children, and 20 years later they are amazed to discover that they have a house full of grown men and women. And I wanted to highlight that because, hey DMs, why have the bard arrive at a tavern and 2 of his children happen to be, why, the classic, like, oh my gosh, we've run into so many of your kids. Why have that happen when you could create that lore here and now? If your bard wants to go get it on, be my guest. And you're gonna have a whole other thing coming when we do a part 2 to this campaign a few years from now. Create the lore by allowing your bards to procreate, and I will stand on that hill, but I won't die on it, so don't do it if you don't want to. And the last rule, which is going to have a sort of part 2 right after it, is all things have life. Fairies born in the last 8 centuries or so, sophisticated, literate, and consorting all their lives with Christians, have no more difficulty than Christians themselves in distinguishing between the animate and the inanimate. But to members of older generations, such as Tom, the distinction is quite unintelligible. Several magical theorists and commentators have noted that fairies who retain this old belief in the souls of stones, doors, trees, fire, clouds, etc. are more adept at magic than the younger generation, and their magic is generally much stronger. We get this footnote when, on their way to Thorsby, or maybe I think it's on their way to the town, Tom stops and wants to go talk to several trees. It actually reminds me of stories of Tolkien going and looking at trees and bushes on his walk, but Tom's having a chat with them. If there's a tree he felt did him a good turn, if there's a stone that did something to him, he's visiting them like they're old friends. He's communing with them. And it is, of course, making the journey very long, and David's going crazy. But we also get the story in the same footnote about this old man in the White Tower who someone tries to kill him with a gun. This fairy who heard that Christians had invented guns and went and got one and was like, I'm gonna try and do it like this. He failed, got captured, was locked away in the White Tower in one room, the gun in the other. The fairy eventually did die. It explains enough time and neglect. A few centuries, a fairy will die if it can never see the sun or eat, but the gun is still there. The pistol and the shot, on the other hand, are still there, still considered by the old man as equally culpable, still deserving punishment for their wickedness. Several other fairies who wished to kill the old man of the White Tower have begun devising elaborate plans to steal the pistol and the shot, which have attained a strange significance in the mind of the old man's enemies. It is well known to fairies that metal, stone, and wood have stubborn natures. The gun and shot were set upon killing the old man in 1697, and it is quite inconceivable to the fairy mind that they should have wavered in the intervening centuries. To the old man's enemies, it is quite clear that one day the gun and the shot will achieve their purpose. And here's what I've been saying: make items sentient. Even if they can't talk, make items have a sense of self, maybe give them a real soul. How you want to qualify that in a game sense, if they count as a life or not, I mean, you'd have to sort that out. But it's my opinion that the magic of the Fae means if you feel strongly enough about something, positively, negatively, that thing has real significance because of that emotion. That also means, and this is kind of our Rule 3 Part 2, that life, therefore, especially when it's short, doesn't really matter as much. If we go by the classic rules that fairies can basically live forever unless they're killed, then things that live a very short time aren't going to seem to matter as much to them. If they already don't care about consequences, they're not going to think of the consequences of killing a mortal, or, I don't know, stealing their baby. Like, oh, they'll die in 70 years anyway, who cares? Like, they're here and gone in a flash. I want that baby now. And you can certainly have fae that feel that lives, even short ones, matter. They might just be pariahs in the fairy community. Might be a kind of a weird opinion to have. Especially when in the fairy realm, all things have life, meaning trees that live forever, rocks that, big boulders that are basically unbreakable unless you drop them off the side of the mountain. They're living for millennium. Well, maybe trees aren't. I don't know. It's your fairy world. Do what you want. But whether you're making a character for yourself or you're creating NPCs, that could be a problem for any party member walking into the fairy realm, because no one really cares about their life. I mean, maybe elves could get by with it, but humans who live a century or less, why do I want to help you? You're only here for a minute. Racism in my D&D game? Nay, nay. Ageism, on the other hand, that's a joke. That's a joke. Anywho, there's my rules. I am holding on to those so tightly as I start to create a part 2 to Wild Beyond the Witchlight. It's not really like connected to Wild Beyond the Witchlight that closely. I just want a part 2 fairy campaign for my players. And if you want to follow along as I create it, check out my Patreon. I make one video per month, basically trying to develop that, come up with ideas, brainstorming. For my lower tier, I will post the stuff I talked about in the video, ideas I had. If I created a monster during a brainstorming session, I'll actually create its stat block, post that there. And of course, check the description below for any links, discount codes on minis. I haven't done this in like 3 months and didn't write a script, so I don't know what else to tell you to do. Like or subscribe. That'd be really cool. Hey, do that. Do that. Subscribe. And of course, have a great whatever it is. And I will see you next time, which won't be 3 months from now. Hold me to it.